My guest on the pod this week is the founder and co-CEO of We All Grow Latina, which is the first network of Latina influencers founded in 2010 with a mission to elevate the voices and stories of Latinas through the power of community. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about her journey. So please welcome Ana Flores to the show.
Hi, Matt. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Well, thank you for jumping on the mic and being willing to share your story with all of us. But before we get into all the goodness there, I wonder if you could just take us back and maybe give us a story about little Anna and maybe tell us what she would have been like.
Little Anna. Oh, that's beautiful. So, little Anna was born in Houston, Texas, to parents from El Salvador. Um, she grew up learning two languages at the same time. Nobody knows how that happened. It just happened because my parents, spoke Spanish at home. They divorced when I was 6, and my sister and I moved back with my mom to El Salvador. El Salvador, tiny little country in Central America, during a really difficult time for the country during the Civil War in the 70s. And 70s and 80s. And I grew up in the midst of that. I grew up in the midst of being in a privileged society in the middle of a civil war that was tearing the country apart, while at the same time traveling back to Houston, Texas to spend time with my dad and his new family. And just really always, I think little Anna was not rooted, right? I was always going from one place to the other, but that gave me what now allows me to do what I do, which is, this bicultural knowledge, being bilingual, really truly understanding what it was to be from an early age a Latina in the United States, and then be the Salvadoreña and in El Salvador, right? And kind of like balancing those two lives.
That's interesting. I'm sure we're going to dive into how that's really helped you, but also how you've helped others with that.
Mm-hmm.
But did you have an idea of what you wanted to be when you grew up?
You know what? I get asked that question so much, and I think that when it affected me the most was when my daughter, who's now 16, asked me. I think when she was around 6 years old, she was like, "What were your dreams when you were little?" Right? Because she's all about like how I support her dreams now. Thankfully, I'm in a place to do that. And I was like, "Girl, I don't remember having those dreams." Right? I wanted to be, yeah, like all of us, a pop star. I wanted to dance with Menudo back then, or whatever it may be. But when it came to aspirations as far as a career in the society that I grew up, it was very much like, you're being bred to marry.
Hmm.
You're being bred to marry. You're being bred to take over your family's business. And I didn't have really a family business to take over, and I really didn't have an ambition to be married and be taken care of. So I've always felt really stuck when it came to like, what is it that you want to do? And it wasn't until I was in my senior year that thanks to Menudo, actually, it's a weird story, but they were visiting El Salvador, and I ended up in a TV studio. And that just opened up a whole other world for me. And I knew then that I wanted to somehow work in that media, though it seemed super far away.
Yeah, definitely. So you graduated from University of Florida.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what did you take away from that experience?
That was such a cool experience because it's Gainesville, right? It's just a college town. That's all there is. That is like your U.S. college town. And it was a lot of fun, but what I really took away was that community that we created amongst the Latinos that were there.
Hmm.
All my friends, my whole support system there were other kids from Mexico, El Salvador, from Venezuela, Colombia, Argentina, just across the board, and we all gravitated and found each other, and we created our own little nucleus there. And seeing what I do now, I can see how that was kind of part of the root of it.
Yeah, definitely. So let's get into your professional journey. As you mentioned, being exposed to TV and production, you got your career started in the entertainment industry.
Mhm.
And what was it like entering that? Because again, you said it's felt far away, but you still made it in. And I'm curious, what did you learn that maybe even still you take with you today?
Okay, so I'm going to have to date myself. Okay, I am 51 years old. So we're talking about the mid 90s here when I was in college. And my dream was to either work for Oprah or work at Univision. Univision was like the only place back there. Was really the only TV network, major network that was broadcasting in Spanish along with Telemundo, but really Univision was just way ahead of the game there. So Univision was in Miami, Oprah was in Chicago. I had never lived in the snow or in the cold. So I'm like, I think Miami's feels a little bit more doable for me. It was just a drive down. So no, literally this was a time when we would watch the shows and look at the credits. And I would sit there and write down the names of the executive producers.
Oh, wow.
And I would send snail mail. I would send them letters and be like, I would love to intern. Univision did not have an internship program at all. And I did have the privilege that I did have a place to stay. And I always like to name the privilege because, where that I could afford to take an unpaid internship at that moment because I did have a place to stay. And, that really, really helped. So I was just relentless and calling until I got a call back. And Artie Izquierdo is his name. I think he's still in Univision. He was like, come on down. I'll meet you. I drove down to Miami, sat in the desk with him. He's like, listen, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. We don't have an internship program, but when can you start? When do you want to come? We'll give you a badge. And literally, I would just sit there all day and from like the first newscast until the last one at 11 o'clock. And I would just sit there wherever they would allow me to sit. I would be in the control rooms. I would be in the studios and the set. So it was like Sábado Gigante, Cristina, like all these iconic Univision shows that I would just sit there until somebody would be like, do you want to help? Right. And I would put myself out there. And that led to working with an incredible producer that was like, I think you need something to do. I'm like, yes, please give me something to do. And she became kind of like my mentor. And I still had 2 more semesters in high school and college. And a week before graduating, she called me and she's like, there's an opening. I need an assistant producer. Will you take it?
Wow.
And she's like, when do you graduate? I'm like, I graduate in a week. I'll be right there. So it paid off. Wow. It definitely paid off for me. And I started my career working at, the most important network in Spanish language.
Yeah. I love that because it's one, just the go after itness that you had to be like, these are the people, these are the decision makers. I'm going to reach out to them and I'm just going to be available and I'm going to put myself out there as opposed to waiting for the perfect role or the perfect opportunity to come find you. You went and found it. And then because they had a relationship with you and they knew who you were the first person they called when there was an opportunity. And I think we sometimes wait until the opportunities are there versus investing in those relationships and those places that can open up for us later.
You have to get yourself in the room.
Yeah,
for sure.
Definitely. So then you made a pivot into more of entrepreneurial endeavors as you're a co-founder of Spanglish Baby. So one thing I like to ask people that go from corporate into being more entrepreneurial is, how did you know it was the right time to make that shift?
So actually the entrepreneurship shift I had been doing for a while. So even before that, the thing is that back then we didn't call it really entrepreneurship, right? It was like this crazy woman who quit her job and is now a freelancer, right? We were freelancers in a way. So my first big move was quitting Univision in 1999 because I fell in love with Mexico City. And we're not talking, I mean, now Mexico City is a hub and everybody wants to be there, but in 1999, no. It was a bit of a crazy move to leave like booming Miami, bustling Miami, where everything was starting to happen, where everything in the Latino world was, centered there, to be like, I'm going to quit my dream job because I see a possibility over here. And more than a possibility, I saw like this deep rooted connection to me, to that there was something in Mexico that was calling me, right? So I talked to my bosses. I was hiring the freelancers in Mexico. And I talked to my bosses. I was like, can I be one of those? Or like, you would have to quit. They didn't have offices in Mexico yet. They only had for newscast. And they're like, you would have to quit and we would hire you there. So I was like, okay, that sounds like a deal. I moved, I quit, and I basically had all these different shows as my client. I would produce, I got a cameraman over there and I would produce content. Televisa, which is like it's definitely the biggest network in entertainment in Mexico, they opened up their doors to me and they're like, you can come in and interview any of our celebrities, any of our clients, because I was the bridge and the connection between
Mm.
the celebrity world in Mexico and Miami at that point. So within a few months, I was hiring people, and I really didn't understand what was going on, but I moved a little bit too quick, a little bit with too much passion and ambition in a country that I didn't understand yet.
Mm.
So it did all come tumbling down after a year. So that was like my first foray into what can I do on my own, right? How can I see a lot more possibilities? And I think what felt limiting to me in the corporate world was that the limits, right? There was always you're only going to get this far, and once you accept, and if you don't know when you in your entry point, once you accept the salary, it is really difficult, right, to scale from to increase that salary as you go around. And I needed more opening of possibilities. So fast forward to many things happen in Mexico. When I finally come to Los Angeles, was still in the corporate, was when I came back into the corporate world. We were part of a team that was opening up a network called Mundos, which is part of NBC Universal. It's called NBC Universo now. I came from MTV prior to that, MTV Latin America and Mexico. And we were only here for like a year and a half when I became pregnant. I got pregnant. And I decided that I wanted to be a full-time mom and that I was at least going to try it out for a few
Mhm.
years. And that's when the recession hit in 2008 and the writer's strike, which we're going through again.
Wow.
So back to your question, how did I decide at that moment? It was kind of decided for me because as much as my husband at the time, now ex-husband, we co-parent, and he lost everything because he was a TV editor. And with the writer's strike and it just completely affected us. So here we were, I had quit. There was no jobs to be had in the entertainment industry, and he lost everything, and we had a baby at home. So that's motivation. And there is data around how, especially women of color, we start businesses out of necessity.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that was definitely my case. And for me, it was, I discovered the world of blogging. So what better place for a content creator, for somebody that comes from media, to see the space that democratized our voices more than anything, for a Latina, for a woman of color, be able to see this is a space where I don't need money, right? I just need to be able to host a blog,
Mhm.
learn how to do it, utilize the skills that I already have. And I saw that world of limitless possibilities.
Mm. Wow. Well, it's one, beautiful that you were able to take what could have been a valley, let's say, in life, and you were able to see it as an opportunity and out of necessity create something that allowed you to continue to advance and use your skills in a different way. But that ultimately led you to write a book too. And
Mhm.
so, as an author, what did you take away from that experience?
So I co-wrote a book with my partner at Spanglish Baby, Roxana Soto. It was a really small independent publisher. They're actually not around anymore, and the book is called Bilingual is Better. I never, so it was funny because I never saw myself as a writer. So my partner Roxana, I brought her on board. I had the idea of Spanglish Baby, but I didn't think that I was the writer, right? I needed the writer to come and write, to balance that out with me, because she was a trained journalist. We met in college, and she was an awarded journalist, had Emmys and all of it. So I was like, okay, we're going to do this together. And throughout the process, I realized that I did have that writing voice, and that, that not only did I have writing voice, but I love doing it. And so many opportunities were opening up through it. And one of those opportunities was, we were pitched to convert the blog in a way into this beautiful book. So what happened for me with the blog, both the blog and the book. So the blog was Spanglish Baby, for parents raising bilingual and bicultural kids. I feel we were both very naive when we came into this, because for us, it was just the beautiful experience of us being bilingual and having this need of our children also access, being bilingual, not only to access, what they need for these 21st century skills that are so important and what it does for your brain, but the emotional connection to our families back home, to her family in El Salvador, in Mexico, her dad. Um, that was our intention. But then we realized as we started writing the book how racist this
Mm.
topic could be approached at, right, from people that really did not want us even talking about the possibility of children having a second language in this country,
Wow.
that it's English only, right? And
Right.
the more we got into the research of how bilingual education had been banned in California, how that, where that came from, most people didn't even know that, and banned in other different states. And so the process for the book for me was a lot of like more this awakening of this activist portion of me and realizing the importance of what we were actually doing.
Hmm. Hmm. So I do want to go back because there was something where you started and you said you weren't a writer. And I think that we can sometimes not realize the power in our words and
Mhm.
how you were able to really shift that to not only become a writer, but actually to realize you enjoy it. And I think we can sometimes put, as you say, these limits on ourselves
Yeah.
and just the words we use. If we take those away and we allow ourselves to say, I'm not a writer yet, or I haven't written enough to feel whatever
Mm.
the thing may be. It's like, it's a very empowering thing, which it sounds like you were able to do. And
Yeah.
then just lastly, like how you've been able to add additional capabilities and skill sets. And as you said, it opened you up to this other part of you as an activist that probably was there, but you didn't really have the way to bring it to life in your work. And so I think just constantly realizing we're always growing, we're always changing, we're always, uncovering different parts of ourselves, which I think is also powerful. But all that leads me to, so where does the idea for We All Grow come from?
So it actually started as Latina Bloggers Connect in 2010. So I launched the blog in 2009. So we're talking early blogger days. No Instagram. I mean, when I tell people, like, definitely no TikTok, right? It was Twitter. It was Facebook. Facebook groups were starting to come out. So it was very much the early days. And it was beautiful because blogs actually did foster community. And Twitter back day, ex Twitter, previously known as Twitter, did foster a lot of community. Repeat me the question. I lost there.
Where did the idea for We All Grow
Yeah,
come
so
from?
the idea.
Yeah.
So when we were with Spanglish Baby, when we launched it, we really didn't understand how we were going to monetize it. But I was seeing a lot of mom bloggers, right, that were women that also came from incredible careers, incredible titles, or not. I mean, they had just really found their way around creating content and creating community around things that mattered for moms, and they were monetizing. And I started realizing that they were monetizing through working with brands. The first woman to actually invite me to a conference, a mom blogger conference, or a blogger conference in general, was Stacey Ferguson. And she used to have a community and a blog called Blogalicious. It was three of them, and they had this conference, Blogalicious, for bloggers of color. And one day I just got this email from her and inviting me to speak at her conference. I was like, oh my goodness, somebody's noticing, right? And that kind of really opened the door to start connecting with other bloggers and start connecting with the brands that were showing up. This was a time when brands had no idea how to categorize us, how to work with us. Were we press? Were we media? Were we, well, the word influencer didn't exist yet, right?
Mhm.
And they didn't understand they needed to pay us or not. And the answer was yes, you need to pay us. Right. And we kind of started all discovering that. And there were very few blogger networks that were popping up, led by women mostly, and mostly led by mom bloggers. And one of those women, it was a mom bloggers club. She approached me. I blogged her at this conference one day, and she was like, "Are you are you going to do what I am doing? Right? Are you going to do for Latinas what I am doing for moms?" And I was like, "You're right. That's exactly what I've been wanting to do." I had already started to discover how to work with brands, and I realized that if I was going to learn how to do that, I wanted my community of other Latina bloggers that we were already connecting via groups on Facebook. It was a group that I started called Blog Hermanas, Blog Sisters, and we were helping each other out. And that's what I did. I just formalized it. I launched a blog called Latina Bloggers Connect with a Google form. And I just said, if you're a Latina blogger and you want to work with brands, sign up here. And my promise was that I would go and find those brands for us to work with. But not only that, that we would support and aid each other in understanding how to grow professionally as
Mm.
bloggers. And in this industry that was just really growing in front of us and around us and with us. So I did just that. Within a week, I had over 100. I think all the Latina bloggers at the time sign up. And within a month, I had my first campaign with Sprint and then Neutrogena and Clorox and McDonald's, and it just exploded.
Wow. Wow. So it's funny because you do have to describe it to people that don't remember what was
Mm-hmm.
happening in the, I'll say 2009, 2010, because that was really an inflection point with technology and these new services. And to your point, like it was so democratized to anybody could do
Mm-hmm.
it, but what you did with it was really kind of determining where it would go and how it would
Mm-hmm.
expand. But given you've been able to expand the company and what you offer and what you provide over that time, I'm curious, how have you remained on the cutting edge? How have you continued to evolve and not just be thought of? Because there's a lot of blogs that never evolved and they kind of went away. So I'm curious, how have you remained nimble and been able to morph as technology and platforms and whatnot and people have changed?
I love that you use the words nimble and morph because that's exactly how I feel. It's these pivots are just always like where you go. You're um, adapting. I'm really good at adapting, and I'm really good at noticing the trends and where things are going, and that also helps me move nimbly, move quickly for the changes. So um, I could have stayed. We could have stayed as Latina Bloggers Connect us once we finally had a category, which was influencer marketing, right? Influencer marketing boomed around 2014, 2015. Really, it just really took off in the way of there was VC money coming in big time, and it just became a multi-billion-dollar business. I had to decide at the time because it was all going more into the technology marketplace. I had to decide if that was where we wanted to go. And that meant that I would have to pursue that VC funding.
Mhm.
As a mom who works in the business every single day, right, and works on it all the time, and then as a co-parenting mom, it was not at the time. You really did have to go to Silicon Valley or to New York, if anything, to access these opportunities. And it is a full-time commitment, going to an accelerator, doing all that. I mean, you're in the midst of it, and it was something that I knew that it was not in my heart. It was not in my passion to give so many other things up to pursue that. And being the CEO of a technology company in that way was not what I was looking for. The influencer marketing became very transactional on both ends,
Yeah.
on both ends. And it just didn't feel right. This was a moment where we were already from zero to making over $2 million in revenue with a team of almost 20 people, mostly moms, women all across the country. We've always worked virtually. Um, I had to make the decision of really like let go of influencer marketing. What also happened was that so many of the brands that we worked with, they were all these multinational global brands that had the capabilities of bringing influencer marketing in house.
Yeah.
So there was this convergence of those things happening. And by this moment, our conference had really exploded. We All Grow Summit, we did it, hosted it the first time in 2015. It started as a conference for bloggers, but really as this world of entrepreneurship boomed around Latinas and Black women and just women in general, because we've always had the know-how and you know the capabilities, the capacity to launch businesses, but we didn't have access,
Mhm.
right? Not only of money, but just in general of all these incredible digital tools that allow us to sell directly to consumer, et cetera. So all of that to say that we started morphing more into this community based company where what mattered to me was going back to what was important in 2010, which for me was bringing us together on,
Mhm.
finding a way to monetize and for us to be able to continue doing what we love. So we decided to let go of influencer marketing. It was a really hard year when that happened. I almost had to file for bankruptcy. And then we decided to just really focus and listen, put our ears down on the ground and be like, what does the community need right now? And what they needed was connection. What they needed was a place of support. What they needed was mentorship. What they needed was role modeling. So in that moment, we changed our mission into really what it is now, which it is just really supporting and elevating our voices and our stories via the power of community.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you've given me already a number of stories where you could have just said, you know what, this isn't worth it, or you know what, I'm gonna go do the corporate thing, or
Oh,
I'm
of
gonna go more
course.
traditional.
I could be
But
making so much more money.
but it seems that you've always been able to find, whether it was a feeling, it was a necessity, it was like your intuition, you've been able to tap into that.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, for other entrepreneurs that are out there, what advice would you give them in terms of tapping into that stick to itiveness of that persisting or pivoting, and like what advice would you give someone of listening to that little voice, or maybe for you, how has that evolved that you've been able to do that over time?
Oh, I have such a great relationship with my intuition now. I wouldn't have been able to say that so many years ago or when I first started. I don't think I gave it enough value
Hmm.
where it was there, and I didn't pay enough attention to it until things went wrong. And I was like, oh, see, right? So you look back and you're like, okay, now I validate that. And it was through so many years of validating that now I prioritize my intuition. But I think we're thankfully talking a lot more about recognizing intuition and validating it, probably not enough about the courage that it takes to take action when that voice comes in. Because what happens is that we hear it, we all hear it, but we make the decision to cover it up because I can't deal with it right now. I don't have the time. It's too much. It's too scary. Like, no, I have children. I can't go that way. I have too many responsibilities, right? There's so many things that we put up, so many barriers within ourselves to make sure that we keep ourselves safe.
Mhm.
It takes a lot of courage sometimes most of the times to act on where our intuition is taking us.
Yeah. Yeah. What someone told me in one of these conversations, there's a difference between scary and risk. And we
Hmm.
sometimes associate the two.
Mm.
And just because something scares you doesn't mean it's risky. And conversely, just because something's a risk, it shouldn't necessarily doesn't have to scare you. And I think separating those and being able to listen to that voice is definitely it's something we all should look to tap into. So switching to the brand of Anna for a bit, what would you say is your superpower?
Oh, connecting. I'm a bridge.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm a bridge. I've manifested it in different ways, but I'm definitely a bridge.
How do you think you've been able to bring that superpower and to be your authentic self throughout your career, bringing it into the work you do?
I think everything I've done has always, in a way, related back to being that bridge. I'm a bridge between cultures. I'm a bridge between people. I feel now more that with my words and me sinking in more into my writing, I'm a bridge between ourselves, right? And like finding ourselves and finding our intuition and finding what connects with our heart. And I would everything I do comes back to how are we supporting each other and how are we supporting ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah. You mentioned your daughter earlier. How would you
Mhm.
say parenthood has impacted your journey?
Oh, in every way. I mean, she loves to take credit. She's like, it all started because of me. I'm like, I know, because I've been so my business is 13 years old, not counting Spanglish Baby, because that one we closed in 2012. But We All Grow is now 13 years old. My daughter's 16.
Hmm.
But really, it all started the journey when she was a year old. So I feel as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, we also have that umbilical cord the same way that we do with our child in a different way. There is the founder will always have that energetic umbilical cord to the business, no matter if you have CEO running it, if you set, if you're just an advisor, there's always going to be that energetic cord. And I do know that as I evolve, my business evolves. And the same thing with my daughter, right? They're mirrors. They're always going to be mirrors. And parenthood has impacted everything in my business.
No, I 100% agree. I had the same experience with this podcast.
Mm.
And when we had our youngest, there was that moment in time of you start asking questions differently, you start thinking about legacy differently, you start really taking inventory of where your efforts are going. And it allows you almost to bring more focus. I think some of it is because you just don't have as much time, but it also allows you to discern where and how you use your resources and your efforts.
Mhm.
Would you say you have, and if so, what would be a mama we made it moment?
A mama, we made it moment. There's a few. There's that time I spoke at the White House. That was, gosh, I can't remember now, 2018. Um, and that was a beautiful moment. And the topic that I was there to talk about was about representation, diversity, and media and toys. So it was very important for me at that moment, and still is. And then I think every single time we pull a Wheel Grow Summit or one of our conferences, it is a mama we made it moment, because it is so difficult to get there, and it's just so beautiful to see the way that we can bring together the community in such a intentional way. It just never, we never take that for granted.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you will remember this, but it's actually the first time I met you
Uh-huh.
was at the We All Grow Summit. I believe it would have had to have been in 2019
Uh-huh.
because my wife Rebecca was coming to
Mhm.
participate. And at the time, our youngest was like, I don't know, she may have been like 3 or 4 months. And so we just all came. And it was like the whole family was there. And at the time, I had to take care of the baby, and then our oldest was actually helping at
Mhm.
Rebecca's booth, but then
Yeah.
Rebecca had to speak, and it was one of those moments in times where I was actually got to see her world in a different way
Mhm.
than I think I ever would have otherwise.
Yeah.
And just the energy of the conference was just like evident. And I was just on the periphery. Like I was just, pushing the stroller and just being daddy daycare. But it was phenomenal, and I know you guys have grown it since then. But
Mhm.
it definitely touched me, and again, I was even participating really.
Oh.
So I can only imagine how many times you've created Mama We Made It moments for others
Mm.
through the conference. So
Thanks for sharing that.
we're gonna close out and hopefully have a little bit of fun. When they turn your life story into a movie, who would you want to play you on the big screen?
Oh my goodness. Hmm. You know, I'm gonna have to say Penelope Cruz.
Okay, okay,
I love her. So yeah.
awesome, awesome. What song would play in the trailer?
So you see, I'm all about Latina. So Hasta la Raíz, Natalia Lafourcade.
Okay. So I'm a huge fan of stories. That's why I do the
Mhm.
podcast. Last name
Mhm.
doesn't hurt. But for you, if you could sit with three people, they could be with us, they could have passed on, and hear their story firsthand, who would be your three?
Mm. Celia Cruz. How fun would it be to like just sit down and have a night with her? I would say Celia Cruz. I would say, Supreme Court Judge Sonia Sotomayor. I can't even imagine if I could just have like intimate talk with her, I would go for it. Like what she must know. Um, let's say Michelle Obama.
Hmm, that's a powerful three.
That's a powerful,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, is there anything I didn't ask that you want to share, or anything you want to ask me?
Or anything that I want to ask you. Mm, that's a good one. I wasn't ready for that one. um, you are definitely married to, you mentioned Rebecca's my friend, and I've actually met her through this whole journey, right? Through her coming through, she's a go-getter, through her coming to the summit, pitching, wanting to be there, and us building a relationship through that. I've seen her go through all the struggles and pitfalls of what it is to fund a company like the beautiful company that she has with Bloomy, and grow it and scale it, and the ups and downs. How is it for you to support such a powerful woman? And you have two other little ones as well.
Yes.
All
Yes.
these girls around you, Matt. Like it takes a
Yes.
very special kind of man.
Well, we always joke that every man's dream is to be surrounded by women, and I somehow backed into that and did not realize the amount of energy and dedication that would take. I'll say, but I think it's. I always go back to who you choose to partner with is the most important decision you'll ever make in life because it sets the standard for life. And so for me, our standard is much higher than anything I could have ever imagined on my own.
Mm,
And the things we talk about are much bigger than anything I could have ever imagined on my own. So that's the gift. That is the gift because as we talked about, you can do the corporate job thing and just go in and push the papers and come home and sit on the couch and watch football and have a good life.
yep.
But when you're with someone that has a larger aspiration, a larger appetite for the impact they could have in this world, it just makes the standard path not enough. And so that to me is the biggest thing for me. And so we are tired. We are
Gosh.
balancing a number of things, and parenting on its own is a challenge and a gift and everything else wrapped up in it. But I would say probably if given the option, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Ah, beautiful. Thanks for allowing me to ask you that question.
No, thank you for asking. So before I let you go, if people want to follow, they want to stay up to speed on your story into future chapters, where should I send them?
Well, my personals are Ana Flores underscore me, and We All Grow Latina. And really, what I'm most excited about is our Amigahood app, where we have over 25,000 Latina women and beyond across the globe connecting every single day in friendship and Amigahood.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'll be sure to include all those links. I appreciate you coming on, sharing your story with us, so transparently and authentically.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Love being here.